somewhere beneath the waves, right now, while you are watching this video, there is a fortune large enough to make you the richest person you have ever met. Not a legend, not a rumor whispered in a rum-soaked tavern. A real, physical, unclaimed fortune, sitting in the mud, in a swamp, in a booby-trapped pit, or on the deck of a ship no living person has ever seen. For 300 years, treasure hunters have sold their homes, mortgaged their futures, and in more than one case, given their actual lives, chasing 5 specific pirate treasures. Every single one of them was real enough to be recorded in official documents, court records, and eyewitness testimony. And every single one of them has never been found. One of them is guarded by an engineering trap so advanced that modern experts still cannot fully explain how 18th century men built it. One of them was hidden by a captain who was hanged specifically because he refused to say where it was, and he kept that secret all the way to the gallows. One of them is worth more than $200 million today, and it is sitting on an island that anyone can legally visit. Tonight, we are going to walk through all 5, the clues, the bodies, the maps that may or may not be forgeries, and by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the smartest treasure hunters in the world still believe at least one of these fortunes is waiting to be found, possibly closer to you than you think. Stay until the end, because the final mystery on this list has a twist that even seasoned pirate historians did not see coming. Before we drop into the first mystery, if dark maritime history, unsolved crimes, and the golden age of piracy is your kind of thing, hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now. We sail into a new mystery every single week, and you do not want to miss the ship. Now, let's go find some gold. In the summer of 1795, a teenage boy named Daniel McGinnis was exploring a small, uninhabited island off the coast of Nova Scotia when he found something that should not have existed. In the middle of a forest clearing, under an old oak tree with a broken branch, was a circular depression in the ground, a sunken patch of earth, as if something enormous had been buried there and the soil had settled on top of it. McGinnis came back the next day with 2 friends and a pair of shovels. What they found in the following hours would trigger one of the longest, most expensive, and most deadly treasure hunts in recorded history. One that is, remarkably, still active today. 10 feet down, they hit a layer of flat stones, clearly placed there by human hands. Not natural. Someone had built this. They kept digging. At 20 feet, they hit a solid layer of oak logs, wedged perfectly into the shaft wall, as if someone wanted to seal off whatever was below. They pulled the logs out and kept going. At 30 feet, another layer of logs. At 40 feet, another. Whoever dug this pit did not want anyone getting to the bottom easily, and yet they left it diggable, almost as if it was designed to tempt you exactly this far, and no further. The boys ran out of money and manpower and gave up, but word spread, and in 1803, a proper excavation company arrived with real funding. They dug past 90 feet and layered throughout the shaft at regular 10-foot intervals were more logs, then a layer of charcoal, then a layer of ship's putty, then coconut fiber, a material that does not grow anywhere near Nova Scotia and would have had to be imported from the Caribbean at enormous expense. Someone had engineered this shaft with materials shipped from across an ocean. This was not a simple hole. This was infrastructure. Then, at around 98 feet, the diggers found a flat stone with strange symbols carved into it. When the stone was eventually translated decades later, the message it revealed was almost too perfect to believe. 40 feet below, £2 million lie buried. The crew pushed forward, hearts racing, shovels moving faster, and then, at night, without warning, the entire shaft flooded. Seawater poured in from some hidden source, faster than any pump of of the era could remove it, and by morning, the pit was full to 65 feet with water that would not go away, no matter what they tried. What they had stumbled onto, whether by accident or design, was one of the most sophisticated booby traps ever built by human hands. Later investigations revealed a series of flood tunnels cut through solid rock, connecting the pit to the nearby beach. The moment anyone dug past a certain depth, ocean water would rush in through these tunnels and refill the pit like a bathtub with no plug. Someone had spent an almost unbelievable amount of labor engineering a trap that would activate itself automatically with no one present centuries after it was built. Since that first dig, more than a dozen major excavation attempts have taken place on Oak Island. Companies have poured millions of dollars into pumps, drills, and shafts. 6 men have died trying to reach the bottom of the pit, the most recent in 2004. Every serious attempt has been swallowed by the same trap over and over for more than 200 years. So who built it? Theories range from Spanish conquistadors hiding looted Aztec gold to Knights Templar concealing the lost treasures of the Crusades, to something far more grounded, in fact, that this was the work of pirates who needed a way to store their loot between raids without a bank, a vault, or a government they could trust. Captain William Kidd's name comes up constantly in Oak Island theories because Kidd is known with absolute certainty to have buried treasure somewhere in the Americas before his execution, treasure that, to this day, has never been fully recovered. Modern surveys using ground-penetrating radar have detected what appear to be man-made cavities, roughly 160 feet below the surface, far deeper than anyone has ever successfully dug. In other words, everything found so far might just be the outer layer of the trap. The real prize, if it exists at all, may still be untouched, sealed under 2 centuries of floodwater, waiting for someone with the right engineering to finally break through. In 2019, a team drilling in a new location on the island claimed to have pulled up fragments of what looked like parchment and lead, along with a scrap of material some investigators believed could be old cloth. None of it has been conclusively linked to a treasure. None of it has ended the search. If anything, every new fragment only convinces the current owners of the island, a Canadian family who has poured their own fortune into the dig for years, that they are close enough that they keep drilling, close enough that television crews keep filming, close enough that, more than 2 centuries after 2 farm boys found a strange dip in the ground, the money pit of Oak Island is still, to this day, an active, unsolved excavation. William Kidd was not supposed to become one of history's most infamous pirates. He was hired by the English crown, backed by powerful investors, and given a legal commission to hunt pirates in the Indian Ocean, not become one. But somewhere along that voyage, everything went wrong, and Kidd crossed the line from privateer to outlaw, a decision that would eventually cost him his life and leave behind a mystery that has outlived him by 300 years. In 1699, knowing that English authorities were closing in on him and that he would likely be arrested the moment he set foot on land, Kidd made a decision that treasure hunters still obsess over today. Before sailing into New York to face his accusers, he stopped, buried a portion of his plunder, and told almost no one where. He was arrested almost immediately, shipped to England in chains, put on trial for piracy and murder. And here is the detail that keeps this mystery alive centuries later. Kidd believed, right up until the moment the noose was placed around his neck, that his hidden treasure would be his bargaining chip. He offered repeatedly to reveal the location of his hoard in exchange for his life. The court refused the deal. In May of 1701, William Kidd was hanged at execution dock in London, and the rope snapped on the first attempt, forcing them to hang him a second time. His body was then coated in tar and left hanging in a cage over the River Thames for years as a warning to other sailors tempted by piracy. He died without ever revealing the location. Some of his treasure, not all, but some, was eventually recovered on Gardiner's Island off the coast of Long Island, used as evidence at his own trial. But historians and treasure hunters agree this was only a fraction of what Kidd actually buried. Kidd's ship logs and later testimony from crew members hint at additional caches hidden across multiple locations during his final voyage, potentially in the Caribbean, potentially along the eastern coast of North America, and, according to one persistent legend, on a remote island in the Indian Ocean itself. In the 1930s, a set of documents surfaced that became known as the Kidd charts, maps allegedly drawn by Kidd himself, marking the locations of his hidden fortune. These charts caused a sensation. Treasure hunters spent decades and small fortunes chasing the locations marked on them, from Southeast Asia to Madagascar. Later analysis strongly suggested the charts were forgeries, created long after Kidd's death to profit from his legend. But the damage, or perhaps the magic, was already done. Kidd's name had become permanently fused with the idea of an undiscovered fortune. What makes Kidd's case different from almost every other pirate legend is that we know, as a documented historical fact, that he genuinely did bury treasure and genuinely did keep at least part of it secret until his execution. This is not folklore built around a rumor. This is a documented act, confirmed by trial records, committed by a man who had every reason in the world to reveal the location and chose silence instead. Which raises the obvious question: what could possibly be worth taking to the gallows rather than trading away? In 1820, the city of Lima, Peru, was on the edge of collapse. Revolutionary forces led by José de San Martin were closing in, and the Spanish colonial government knew the city could fall at any moment. Terrified that the revolutionaries would seize the immense wealth stored in Lima's churches and royal treasury, colonial officials made a desperate decision. They would evacuate the treasure by sea before the rebels arrived. The scale of what was loaded onto ships in Lima's harbor is almost impossible to picture. Gold and silver bars, jewel-encrusted crowns, solid gold church fittings, and, according to the most repeated account, a life-sized statue of the Virgin Mary cast entirely in gold, along with two golden, jewel-studded infant Christ figures. This was not a chest of coins. This was the accumulated religious and royal wealth of an entire colonial empire, crammed onto a single vessel for safekeeping. The ship chosen for this job was called the Mary Dear, and its captain was a British sailor named William Thompson. The Peruvian officials trusted Thompson completely, trusted him enough to load an empire's fortune onto his ship and send him out to sea with almost no oversight. It was, in hindsight, one of the worst decisions in the history of colonial South America, because the moment Thompson's ship was safely out of sight of land, he made his choice. He and his crew turned on the Spanish officials and guards who had come along to protect the treasure, killed every single one of them, and threw their bodies into the ocean. The treasure now belonged to nobody but Thompson and his men. Rather than simply sailing off with an unimaginable fortune, Thompson made a decision that treasure hunters still debate to this day. Instead of keeping the loot aboard, where it could sink his overloaded ship or be seized if he was caught at sea, he sailed to a small, densely forested, uninhabited island roughly 300 miles off the coast of Costa Rica, called Cocos Island, and buried the entire fortune somewhere in its jungle interior. It was, in hindsight, a fatal mistake. Not long after, Thompson's ship was intercepted by a Spanish naval vessel. Most of his crew were tried and executed for piracy on the spot. Thompson and one other man escaped that fate only by making a desperate offer. They would lead the Spanish back to the buried treasure in exchange for their lives. The Spanish agreed. Thompson's was brought back to Cocos Island under guard, supposedly to point out the burial site. And then, in the dense jungle, Thompson and his companions simply vanished. They slipped away from their captors and disappeared into the forest, never to be seen or definitively identified again. The treasure of Lima, believed today to be worth well over $200 million, has never been recovered, despite the fact that Cocos Island is a known, mapped, legally accessible location that anyone can travel to. More than 300 separate expeditions have searched the island since Thompson's disappearance. None have found so much as a single gold coin from the original hoard. The island's terrain, thick jungle, unstable volcanic soil, and a landscape that shifts constantly due to erosion and landslides, has made systematic searching nearly impossible. Franklin D. Roosevelt himself reportedly searched for the treasure during a personal expedition in the 1930s and came away empty-handed, somewhere on an island you could legally book a boat trip to. Next month, there may be a gold statue of the Virgin Mary still waiting in the dirt, exactly where a murderer left it 200 years ago. No name in the history of piracy carries more weight than Blackbeard. Born Edward Teach, he built a reputation so terrifying that entire towns would surrender the moment his ship was spotted on the horizon. He wove hemp into his beard and lit it on fire before boarding enemy ships, so that he appeared through the smoke like something risen out of hell itself. Merchant captains would strike their colors and hand over everything they owned rather than risk facing him in battle. In November of 1718, after a career of terrorizing the Caribbean and the American coastline, Blackbeard was finally cornered off the coast of North Carolina by a Royal Navy lieutenant named Robert Maynard. What followed was one of the most brutal hand-to-hand ship battles in naval history. Accounts from the men present describe Blackbeard taking 5 gunshot wounds and more than 20 sword cuts before he finally fell. His severed head was mounted on the bowsprit of Maynard's ship as proof of the kill and as a warning to every pirate who heard the story afterward. His flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, was eventually located off the coast of North Carolina in 1996, and archaeologists have spent decades carefully recovering cannons, coins, and personal items from the wreck. But here is the detail that has kept treasure hunters obsessed for 3 centuries. Blackbeard's actual fortune, the loot he accumulated from years of successful raids, was never found on his ship and was never found on his body. According to accounts collected shortly after his death, Blackbeard was asked, not long before his final battle, whether anyone besides himself knew where his treasure was hidden. His answer, as recorded by contemporaries, was chilling in its simplicity, that only he and the devil knew where his money was, and that whichever of the two of them lived longest would take it all. He never got the chance to retrieve it. Blackbeard operated across an enormous territory, from the swamps and inlets of the Carolinas, through the barrier islands of the Outer Banks, down into the Caribbean and its hundreds of uncharted coves. He was known for using shallow, hidden waterways that larger naval vessels could not follow him into, which means any cache he buried could be almost anywhere along thousands of miles of coastline, much of which has physically changed shape over 300 years due to shifting sandbars, hurricanes, and erosion. Local legend along the North Carolina coast holds that Blackbeard placed a curse on his hidden fortune before his death, a belief so persistent that generations of local treasure hunters have refused to dig in certain marked locations, convinced that anyone who disturbs his gold will suffer his fate. Whether or not you believe in curses, the practical result is the same. Entire stretches of coastline that fit the profile of a Blackbeard hiding spot have simply never been searched. Out of a mixture of superstition and the sheer scale of the terrain involved, modern researchers have narrowed their focus to Ocracoke Island, where Blackbeard was killed, and to Bath, North Carolina, where he lived openly for a time, under a royal pardon before returning to piracy. Both locations remain active sites of speculation, but after 300 years, the man who terrified an entire coastline with fire in his beard has kept his final secret better than almost any pirate in history. There is one more detail that makes Blackbeard's case genuinely unsettling rather than simply romantic. Unlike Kidd, who at least tried to trade his secret for his life, Blackbeard never got the opportunity to negotiate anything. He died in the middle of a battle he almost certainly knew he could not win, having been warned days earlier that naval forces were closing in on his position. He had time to run. He chose to stay and fight instead, which has led generations of historians to ask an uncomfortable question. Was Blackbeard simply too proud to flee, or was he protecting something on that stretch of coastline that he could not risk anyone else discovering while his back was turned? Of everything on this list, the final mystery is, by financial value, almost certainly the largest, and yet it is the one most people have never even heard of. In 1511, the Portuguese military commander Afonso de Albuquerque conquered the Sultanate of Malacca on the Malay Peninsula, one of the wealthiest trading ports in the entire world at that time. Malacca sat at the crossroads of trade routes connecting China, India, and the Middle East, and its royal treasury reflected centuries of accumulated wealth from that position. When Albuquerque's forces took the city, they seized the Sultan's entire treasury, an amount of gold, diamonds, and jewels so large that contemporary accounts struggle to fully describe it. To transport this fortune back to Portugal, Albuquerque loaded the treasure onto his flagship, a massive vessel called the Flor de la Mar. The ship itself was already notoriously old and structurally unstable. It had been in active service for years longer than a ship of its type was typically expected to last, and its hull was reportedly in poor condition even before this final voyage. In November of 1511, sailing near the coast of Sumatra, the Flor de la Mar was caught in a violent storm. The overloaded, aging ship could not withstand the conditions. It broke apart and sank, taking with it the entire looted treasury of Malacca, described by some historical accounts as including gold statues, ceremonial weapons studded with precious stones, and literal barrels filled with diamonds and rubies collected over generations by the Malaccan royal court. Albuquerque himself survived the sinking, clinging to wreckage until he was rescued, but the treasure went straight to the seafloor and has never been recovered. Modern historians and marine archaeologists estimate the value of the lost cargo at multiple billions of dollars in today's currency, based on contemporary accounts of the Sultanate's wealth, making the Flor de la Mar arguably the single most valuable shipwreck ever lost at sea, pirate adjacent or otherwise, since it was Albuquerque's own men who had effectively pirated the wealth from Malacca in the first place. Multiple expeditions, funded by governments and private companies alike, have searched the waters off Sumatra and the Malacca Strait for the wreck. The search is complicated by several brutal realities. The exact sinking location was never precisely recorded and has been debated by historians for centuries. The seafloor in that region is covered in thick layers of shifting silt that can bury a wreck completely within decades, and the waters are claimed by multiple nations, which has repeatedly complicated the legal permissions required for any serious deep-sea search. Indonesia and Malaysia have both, at various points, restricted or halted search operations over disputes about who would have rights to the recovered treasure if it were ever found, meaning that even if someone locates the wreck, the legal fight over who actually gets to keep the the greatest lost treasure in maritime history might be just as difficult as finding it in the first place. 500 years later, somewhere beneath the waters near Sumatra, sits what may be the most valuable shipwreck on the planet, completely undisturbed and completely undiscovered and completely unclaimed. 5 treasures, 5 vanishing acts, a booby-trapped pit that has killed 6 men and defeated every excavation company for 200 years, a hanged captain who chose the gallows over giving up his secret, a golden statue of the Virgin Mary hiding somewhere in a jungle you could book a plane ticket to next week, a curse that still keeps treasure hunters away from an entire stretch of American coastline, and a shipwreck that may hold more gold than any other vessel ever lost at sea. Here's what all 5 of these mysteries have in common. Every one of them is backed by real documents, real trial records, real eyewitness accounts. This is not folklore invented for campfire stories. These are verified historical events with one final piece of the puzzle still missing. And that missing piece is exactly why people are still searching. Right now, today, while you watch this video, which one of these 5 would you want to search for if you had the chance? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this video pulled you in, hit like and share it with the one friend who would absolutely drop everything for a real treasure hunt. And if you want to go deeper into the darkest, strangest corners of pirate history, subscribe now, because we set sail into a brand new mystery every single week. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon.